Hi everyone, at the workshop today. This turned out to be a Wacker Tamper day. So actually Wacker Tamper week. Last week was all generators, this week it's all Tampers. So this video I'd like to keep it as short as possible, depends if I get interrupted or not, but basically I want to get you through the troubleshooting that I do as an authorized service for these machines. How I check for anything that might be wrong with them. It's the quick inspection part. I might, if I have some time, I'll put up some more in-depth videos about specific issues and as I fix them. But we'll see how the day turns out. I'm quite busy. But they do have 3 model specific issues. And the model is BS60-2 plus, so the plus comes from the fact that it has a separate tank for the fuel and a separate tank for the oil, and it mixes it itself at the carburetor intake, so it makes sure that you always get the adequate mixture. From my point of view, it's just an extra layer of things that can go wrong, an extra set of hoses that you have to replace. But to each their own. So let's take a look at what are some of the model specific issues that I look out for. The first thing is the tamper base. It's the rammer itself. So basically you're supposed to have 2 screws on each side, and after a while, and it doesn't take a long time, you can see that those screws work themselves loose. They fall out. And I actually pressure wash this so that I can show it, but it forms cavitations from the dirt getting compacted in there. It works as an abrasive, so as the support goes from underneath the metal, it wears away a lot faster, a lot easier. It also gets bent more easily, and it ends up something like this. After a while, this is actually a BS600 model, and yeah, that's something to look out for. If you want to avoid this cavitation, this type of issue, what you can do is actually drill new sets of holes a little bit deeper inside, and put a larger washer and just tighten it down, so to force that plate towards that rubber base. That's something that you can do. But yeah, the alternative is to replace it after a while, which is like 300 euros or something like that. So yeah, that's the first one. The second model specific issue that I have found is basically this part right here. So these screws, there are 3 on both sides. This is what connects the handle to the base, and you can see that there are different types of screws here. So they have already worked themselves out and somebody replaced them. We can see on some of the models that there are actually screws missing completely, and on other ones that it's becoming loose, and signs of repair on most of them. So this is just something you really want to keep an eye on, that these are all tight. I actually recommend taking them each out and adding them back with some red Loctite, even if they come as new from the factory. Otherwise it will ruin this base and it will turn into garbage very soon. They don't even last a year of work with the original setup. All right, so the third thing that I have found that these that the issue that these have is actually, it's specific only to this particular model. That's a very expensive repair, is actually this one. So this here is your oil thing. This is where the oil flows down, and you can, if you get a little bit of shock, this is just a very bad plastic here that can get broken or it can leak. So if the oil is leaking here, you're gonna get bubbles in the system or whatever, obviously what will happen is the engine will get ruined very fast. You can completely bypass this, okay? So you can just never put any oil here, cut it off, or plug it up, whatever, and just put your mix into the fuel tank itself. But if you need to replace that, it's quite expensive. Not sure how much exactly, don't have the latest quote, but it's extremely expensive. Okay, another thing you need to check is the oil level. So this oil level has to be exactly at the middle. So if you clean it and put a little bit of water here, then it becomes more transparent and you can actually see the level. So if there's any oil whatsoever missing from this when on a plain surface, just keep in mind that it has to be level. Then you can read the correct oil level. If it's missing oil, then you have to look at leaks around this one here, around the tambour or burduf or whatever you want to call it. So you have to look for stuff like this, and again, if there's a fissure or a pinhole or whatever, it's very hard to actually repair. Most of the time you do have to replace it. So there are YouTube videos on how to replace the bellows. So you can just Google or search on YouTube bellow replacement, but basically you need to unscrew this screw, remove this collar, and then press this down so that it gets disattached from here, right here, and then you have a pin, you break it down and you can separate the two, and then you can replace the bellows. But there are videos already covering that, so I won't go to that too deep. All right, now let's take a look at how we try to start these. So you want to feel that the engine has compression. You should feel like 3 or 4 kilograms of force every time you pull on this cord. So that's your compression right there. That's your easy compression test. If it moves very easily in and out, then you might have a loose spark plug, or you might have an engine that has no more compression. The other thing that can happen is basically that when you pull on this cord, your tamper tries to lift up and down, and that's a clutch issue. So the clutch is located right here at the end of the engine, okay, and it looks like this. This is your clutch. Very rarely you have to replace it, and very often it's just a broken spring. So you can see the end of it is broken, so it comes loose and it always engages the rammer base, and then as soon as you try to pull the cord, the engine is already under load, so obviously it will not start, and it's going to try to tamp at the first pull. So yeah, that's quite an easy way to break a pull cord, and it's quite an easy way to fix as well. It's quite easy to fix. You have 3 screws here, so obviously you do have to disassemble this shield and the exhaust in order to access those 3 screws, but it's not that difficult of a repair actually. Probably the most work you will have is actually disconnecting all of the hoses, but yeah, perfectly doable, and all you need is a spring here to keep this going for quite a long while longer. I do recommend to replace both of those. The next thing you would want to check is this acceleration mechanism. So this is the way you start it, right? It has to be on this position to start, and you have to be able to hear a click at the choke lever. It has to stay that way. So if it does that, and as you pull the acceleration to all the way open, you should see that acceleration cable move all the way up. Okay, so from all the way down to all the way up until it hits that little plastic right there, and that's how you know that you don't have an issue with the acceleration cable. Okay, so the next thing that you want to check is basically if your little fuel tap is working or not. So built into here you actually have a fuel tap. It's the one in which those two hoses go into. So it's this one right here, this one, and it has a button on the end, so when you press this down, what it does, it's supposed to cut the fuel. So quite easy to test that. You can just remove this hose from here, and actually this is directly, this one comes directly from the tank, and then it goes into there. Okay, so if you remove this hose, the second one which goes directly to the carburetor, if you remove this hose and it's turned off but still fuel is dripping, then that means that needs to be replaced. It's two screws holding it inside of here. You do have to remove this plate from here, the fuel tank from here, in order to access it. But basically if you don't fix that, it will pressurize your hoses, your filter and your carburetor, especially during the summer. Especially if there's only a little bit of fuel in here, it's gonna make tremendous pressure, and it's just going to put strain on the carburetor, and then every component, even on this one, it's going to be just too much pressure for it to handle long term. So you do want to actually change it. The next thing you want to do is basically check if this little pump is working as designed. It should be completely filled with fuel, so not only halfway. If it's only halfway filled, or it has a lot of bubbles in it, or if it's not going back and front as I'm showing right now, then it means that you have a kinked fuel line or a blockage either in the carburetor or in one of the fuel lines. If it's not full of fuel, then you have a leakage. Okay, you're getting air somewhere on one of the lines, so you're getting air. That can also happen, but that's how you check this. It should always be full, and it should jump right back up, and you should be able to follow the fuel moving back into the tank. It should circulate quite freely, the fuel, through the entire system. I do recommend every time you work on these to replace also the filter, because these filters, what happens after a number of years is the paper inside actually starts to get broken down, and it clogs your carburetor. So that's something that can happen. The next thing that you obviously want to check is just make sure that there are no leaks around the oil hoses. So the best way to do that is actually if you clean, if you fill the tank with oil and you clean it with the pressure washer, and you just take a look if there is anything dripping. So you can see right here, this was cleaned, and we do have oil, and we do have a damaged hose there, and it is dripping down the machine. So in this case you might have an issue. You will not get you will get air bubbles in there, or you will not get oil into the carburetor. So this might lead to your engine getting ruined very fast. So that's how you make sure. You just keep it clean, you leave it overnight, and you check if it's dripping oil from anywhere around this part or anyway anywhere around that part. So you can see actually that it is dripping over there as well. So that is damaged and needs to be replaced, and that hose is also damaged and needs to be replaced. Okay, the other thing you need to take a look at is actually the air filter, and you don't actually need to replace those that often. You can just blow them out with an air compressor and wash them out. They're quite a good filter. They can be reused many times. Just make sure when you put them in and they are dry, and make sure that this plastic housing is not cracked, or just make sure that this assembly right here where your air filter is, just make sure that it's watertight. That's the most important, because through that air admission hose right there, any water that gets in here, it will go directly into your engine. And in terms of spark plugs, the spark plugs, these ones comes with their NSKs, BPHR7S, I believe. They don't pose any issues most frequently, but you can quite easily replace it with this kind of tool without having to disassemble the whole thing. This is the easiest way to remove those four spark plugs. You need one of these. I believe this is a 21mm socket, and it has this mechanism so you can fit it inside of there without having to remove the oil tank or the fuel tank from up here. So you can see it's an extremely snug fit to get in there to that spark plug. Let me see if I can show. You see, that's all the room you have there. Otherwise you have to disconnect this hose, you have to remove the plate, you have to remove this just to access that. So yeah, it's a pretty bad system if you ask me. Built for hard maintenance, but definitely doable. Okay, so there's a couple more things I want to go through, but these are the main ones. Okay, so you will want to check your hoses, you will want to check compression, you will want to check your exhaust as well. So this is your exhaust. If you remove your exhaust, this is how it will look like. Not this one. This is the exhaust hole right here. No, this is the carburetor intake. This is the exhaust. So if it's bogging down, not working well, it might be a carb issue, but usually what I've seen on these Wacker models is a lot of carbon buildup right at the throat of the exhaust. So you just want to place the piston in a position where you can see the piston ring, so that you don't risk any dirt getting back into the engine. You keep it at an angle, and you scrape out all of the carbon, and you also use a vacuum cleaner to make sure to remove all that carbon that you scraped off. And then you also go in with a rag and like a screwdriver and make sure that with a little bit of carburetor cleaner all the remaining carbon sticks to it. So that's also something that is part of the regular maintenance that we need to do for these machines. And to diagnose if it's a carburation issue, obviously you already checked the fuel line. So the way to do it is basically you remove the spark plug, you inject a little bit of gasoline into the engine, you pull the cord, and if the engine is running for a couple of seconds, then basically you have a carburetor issue. So at that point there are a lot of videos showing how to replace a carburetor, to repair a carburetor with a carburetor kit, but you will need the appropriate kit for it. So that's what I'm going to show you next. So let's say you know or you think you know what's wrong. So the very next step would be you need to find the parts, the replacement parts. So all you have to do is hit up Google and you can type in the model that you have, BS60-2 parts, or you can put parts diagram, or you can put in parts manual or whatever. And then usually the first thing that comes up is a manual such as this. And here you have all of the parts diagrams, and you can order them online. I wouldn't recommend you to buy the fuel filter or the hoses from them. You can buy hoses, so the only thing you need to note is that if you buy a hose, the inside diameter should be between 6 or 7 millimeters of that hose. You can buy either the ones for motorcycles or the transparent ones or whatever, but I recommend you buy not the cheapest ones, the Chinese ones. It's something better, a good hose, and that's all you need to do. That it's supposed to have a 7 millimeter inside diameter or 6 millimeter in case you get a thick hose like this. You see how thick that is? So that's actually going to expand and you don't even need a clamp for it. So I sometimes put this in there to hold the filter, the air filter. Let me just show you that real quick so that you know what I'm talking about. But you see, you have this connection right here. You have this very short length of, and this, you know, this is all that supports this filter. This is not, you know, screwed to anything, so the hose is the only thing keeping these two parts together. So I like to put that black hose right there, and then you can use the 7 millimeter outside diameter hose for the rest of the lines. All right, so coming back, we have our parts diagram, and I promised you guys that we will go and locate the carburetor kit. So it should be somewhere around the bottom. Okay. Yeah, so this is it. This is the carburetor kit. So this is number 41. This here is the carburetor kit. So if you go down to number 41, you can see the carburetor repair kit. You have a number here, and this is the number that you're going to have to give to your authorized dealer, right? So that they can order in the parts for you. So if you just go and search for this, you might find, you know, some various other you can buy it from Amazon or Technic Mag or whatever. You can buy aftermarket for it, you know. But if you go to the Wacker official website and you look at the authorized dealers, let's just do that as well. Wacker Neuson, and you just put in your country. So I put in Romania because that's where I'm from, and you need to find the official Wacker Neuson website. But you see, yeah, I found a dealer, and that's actually what you're looking for an official dealer. So these are the guys that you can call up. But if you go to wackerneuson.com, I think it is, .com, yeah, so it's all together. And then if you select your country here, Romania, And then contact form, production sites. No, it's not this one. I've actually never used this. I just buy my parts. I found the number and noted it down. It's a dealer. It's called Epinvest, and I've been using them. It's quite interesting that we figured this one out together. Become a dealer. No, it's not this one. Find the dealer. Okay, it's here on top. Find the dealer. Yeah. And then we can select. You can either locate yourself or put in your location. I can put here Romania. And then we can select genuine parts, apply, and you get all of the companies and their phone numbers. So you call them up, the ones that are closest to you, and these are the codes that you're supposed to give them so that they know what part you need. Or you can just Google after these codes yourself, and you might find an online dealer that sells them. Just make sure that you buy original and not aftermarket so that it works just right. All right, so this is it in a nutshell. You do have to make sure that the parts diagram that you're looking for is exactly for your machine. I just clicked the first one that I found, but this is actually for the BS62i. I need the BS60-2 plus. So things like that, just look out for. But usually all of them have the exact same components, like 90% of them. Especially the carburetor, I've seen it's basically the same for all of them. The tamper base, the same. The bellows, the same. Like all the bigger ones, the major components are exactly the same across multiple models for these tampers. But you do want to make sure that you find the parts diagram for exactly your device, just to be sure. And that's it. So I really hope this helped. The only thing that I want to show you guys still is how to change the oil in the base. This is something that you're supposed to do at quite a regular interval. So you have a screw at the very bottom, okay? You have to unscrew that. You put the tamper like this, you put a dish beneath it or whatever, a piece of plastic. You let the old oil out, you inspect it, you make sure that there's no metal chips in it or whatever. After that, after you have drained it, you can also run it for a while so that it all gets mixed and stirred up, so that all the gunk that is settled at the bottom actually gets, circulated a little bit. It also gets heated up a little bit, and it's gonna flow easier if you work a little bit with it, but you don't absolutely need to do that. So after you emptied all of it, you can do an extra step. Is basically with a 27mm socket. You can remove this little inspection window here, and you can clean it out with like carburetor cleaner or gasoline. Do not use brake cleaner because it will mess up the plastic and it will no longer be transparent. But you can clean that, and then you turn it upside down, and through the same hole you put into it like 400 milliliters of 10W30 motor oil. Okay, that's what it takes. I use Honda 10W30 motor oil. You can use anything you have. Just make sure it's a good quality oil and not some cheap stuff. And they usually 99% of them, regardless of model, take 500 milliliters of oil. But just start with 400 milliliters and then add another 50 if needed, and in the end you should end up with 500 milliliters of oil, and the oil level should be exactly here when on a plane surface, so it should be exactly at the middle. And it's fine if you add more. I've seen rammers that had 1.5 liters of oil, so 3 times as much inside, and it rammed just fine. But you do not want that oil level to go below the half mark of that inspection window. If it does, you do have a leak, and you do have to inspect the bellows and check out where that link is. Maybe it's a pinhole, maybe these came loose, whatever, but yeah. And the final thing is, if your rammer is working perfectly, start up just fine, accelerate just fine, but it's beating all over the place, then you might have a tamper misalignment. Okay, so that means that your base isn't aligned with your handle. So the two should be aligned this way, and they should be aligned this way as well, almost perfectly. Okay, and that's how you know. So the way you correct that, so that it goes straight and it doesn't jump to left to right, you know, it just jumps all over the place, is you just loosen this screw here. Let me see. You just loosen this screw right here, and at that point you can basically twist and adjust this. You line them up just by sight so that they are parallel, and you tighten the screw back. Not too much, okay? So it has to be quite tight, but you don't want to be so tight that you actually pinch this plastic and perforate it. But this is a piece of metal, you see, sometimes even at an angle. So you don't want to over tighten this so that it pinches your Bordeaux. Alright guys, I'm gonna go back to work now, start to repair some of these, and hopefully even get out another video of you of how to change the fuel lines for these. Take care, bye.